Okay, I'll try and make a start then, and to the huge audience that's here. Okay, we're going to look at one of the questions that's always been asked is about how much screen time is good time and how much is bad time. So that's not working. So, the kinds of things that we see in many of our Australian newspapers, things like, smartphone alert causes similar symptoms to ADHD and digital intoxication, and we've got these digital detox camps. And so, a number of the talks I've been to, people have been presenting data which really are from very limited size studies, and also in terms of how they've collected the data. So this is... probably you're aware of the screen rules that they've been saying up to now that you should spend less than 2 hours on screens because of the detrimental health effects. But really, when you look at it, the 2 hours is not feasible because schools nowadays use up to 6 hours a day on screens. And I don't think you can actually separate out the screen use at schools from the screen use at home. I mean, to me, a screen is a screen is a screen. And certainly, studies up to now have not included screen use, at schools. So I think that really we've not got the accurate picture of screen use and the effects of screen use. Why do we set time limits? Well, because the data tells us that it's linked to a lot of physical health, adverse physical health outcomes such as cardiometabolic disease. We know it's blood pressure problems through to depression, anxiety, attentional behaviours and all that. But really the results lately have been quite mixed. We're seeing some positive outcomes as well of screen use. It's just that no one is actually saying, well, have we looked longitudinally? This is one of the big limitations. But of course, you can't really wait 10 years to collect data to come to the answers if you want to do longitudinal studies. Also, studies up to date haven't used all screens. They've either been limited to video games or watching TV, and many of them have not looked at the full adolescent period. And so we're not sure really what the current situation is about how much time do adolescents spend on screens and what screens and what screen activities. And I think there's a differential effect on these different activities and screens on mental health outcomes, for example. So the study that we conducted, it's using an accelerated longitudinal cohort design. And so we had students in grades 3. Now these were 8-year-olds, 5, 7 and 9, so it's 8-year-olds up to 14. And then we follow these students for 3 years. So we get the kids who are in grade 3 go to 4, 5, the 5s go 5, 6, 7, 7, 8, 9. So we actually get a 10-year growth curve. We can actually chain overlapping cohort pieces together to get a 10-year growth curve from 3 years of data. And so what we were doing, we looked at the screen use of these participants, a minimum of twice a year, different times of the year, so we got a good representative sample of sort of the summer, the winter, the autumn, the spring. And also, we took them at different, we did weekends and weekdays because we wanted to see whether there were differences in what they were doing over these periods of time. We also devised this screen survey, an electronic link, and you can see we didn't have any names, it was just a code, so we didn't know who the kids were. We could actually trace them, we could link them together by the codes that they provided. We made it interactive so that they could actually click on screens. We had sliding bars which measured the amount of time that they spent on screens. We looked at the different kinds of activities and the times that they did on each of these activities. But the other thing that we did was we said from the time that you wake until the time you go to sleep. Right, because we found some kids are actually on the screens up until sort of 11 and 12 o'clock at night, and so we got this sort of comprehensive survey which went out a minimum of twice a year. Typically when you think about that 2-hour rule, which has now just been superseded, and I don't think it's that good a rule because parents are saying, we need some kind of time limit. You know, at the moment we're saying, well, as long as it's good quality programming, you know, what's good quality programming? So typically on a weekday, you've got, you know, over 60% of adolescents who are exceeding that 2-hour limit. 45% of 8-year-olds are exceeding that 2-hour limit, and we've got 80%. Now that doesn't surprise me, considering the use of smartphones and all the things that students use. We find that there's an increasing sex age disparity, so girls are more likely to exceed that 2-hour limit as they get older, particularly by grade 9. And you can see that when it comes to looking at multiple device use, you know, that we've got, you know, that nearly 5% of kids on 4 separate sort of screen activities, which was social networking, passive use, which is TV, we looked at video gaming, and sort of web use, mainly for homework, things like schoolwork. And so, you know, 5% of kids are simultaneously using a number of screens in excess of that 2 hours. When you look at the different activities, boys are more likely than girls to exceed it for gaming, which is something we knew. And when you look at the girls, for social networking, web use and TV, passive viewing, girls are more likely. I think the thing that's of interest is that as girls get older, particularly for social networking, the amount of time that they spend increases exponentially. I think it was something like 15 times the use of social networking by the time they got to grade 9, following from grade 3. So over that period of time, they're almost 15 times more likely than boys to be sort of social networking in excess. And age 10 seems to be an age where, you know, this is the age at which people start to exceed these safe limits. Now they're now telling us that 2 hours is not an unsafe limit, but we're not sure what that's based on. So the problem is that we use this accelerated design. So we've got the sort of the cohorts. We had to take the grade 3s out, the 8-year-olds, because at that age we found that we couldn't get a good model fit. That was just too young. Then when we tried to growth curve over this full 10 years, we couldn't get a good model fit again. And so we had to say we have to do it separately. So we'll take the grade 5 cohorts and we'll look at them over the 3 years, the grade 7s over the 3, and the grade 9s over the 3. Every time we tried to link the whole thing together, because technology's been changing so rapidly, we just could not get that good model fit. And so we're now looking at this latent growth curve modelling separately for cohorts. And we find this is probably a better way to explain the screen use. And this is what it looks like actually. So if you look at social networking, which we found initially was the most dangerous one, really, particularly for girls. When you get to this is the grade 5s, the grade 7s and the grade 9s, you can see what happens, that really here, the grade 7 girls and the boys parallel over that 3 years. No real changes. It's here where they start off in grade 9 where the acceleration begins, which really, again, we'd expect, I think, that it's, you know, 14 years of age through to 16, 17 years of age. And then when you look here at the web use, again, no increases. We can't really say about increase from here to here because we're just following the cohort. You can see here parallel. When we look here at gaming, we actually get reduction. So the grade 5s, these 10-year-olds, same here, and here again it's parallel. There's nothing really happening in all of the sort of the screen use with kids. It stays at parallel. The ones that start high stay high, the ones that are low stay low as such. And when you look at the total screen use, here we tend to get this acceleration at the grade 7s when we put in totals. But here it's the girls that decline in the screen use. They tend to just to focus really on that social networking. It seems to be that with girls. So we've really got no real homogeneity within these trends, you know. And we see this relative stability. Between grade 7 and 9, we get the increase to its peak, particularly amongst girls. And by grade 9, you can see screen use equates to almost 35% girls, 25% of boys' daily time. That's based on this sort of 8 hours sleep. Now, I think the interesting thing to me is we have these potential cohort effects, and that is that within each of those ages, that grade 5, grade 7, grade 9, and the grade 3, because of this shift away from desktop to the more larger kinds of screens, to the more portable, I think we've had this real sort of effect across the different ages. And we also know that at this age, it's a particular age of risk for the emergence of mental health issues. One of the things we were very interested in was depression, and we can see that when you look at the data for depression, that 5 to 9% clinically depressed at this age, 25% have experienced depressive episode by the end of adolescence, 9 to 16% experience subclinical levels, and 13 to 15 is the peak age of onset of depression. And 13 to 15 appears to be the age for this acceleration in screen use. Now, we've got this longitudinal study, this accelerated design. The ones that have looked at depression so far have tended to be the cross-sectional studies. But what we've done is we've actually said, let's look at these depression trajectories with our sample. So if we take the sample using the Tools Depression Inventory, and we've got those twice a year, remember, over that full study, you tend to find in schools 3 trajectories. So this is the entire cohort. But if you say, let's look at sort of a cluster method, you find that you've got 3. You've got this group we call developing depression. So we have groups of kids who at the start of the study are here, and then throughout this period of time increase in depression. We've got the normal, and we've got these that really start high and then decline slightly over the period of time from these repeated measures. So we've got these 3 latent groups. I think an interesting one like this is when you look at it in terms of screen use. So the ones that are developing depression in year 1, and this trajectory shows improvement over time, they have higher average screen use at year 1, and it's sustained throughout. Males who are developing depression increased in screen use across all of those 4 activities: social networking, passive screen use, gaming, and web use. Females who are developing depression, the screen use is higher for passive screen use. That's the TV watching, the streaming of things live, and social media use. The strongest association between depression trajectory and change in screen use over time is at grade 7. And that was at the start of the study, this grade 7, which again we're looking at 13 years of age. Now, of course, the issue is, we've got these associations, but does one cause the other? And so this is a really sort of clever little design. It's called a cross-leg panel design. And it looks at whether depression at 1 causes screen use at 2, screen use at 1 causes depression. It takes all of these things into account. And we find that increases in screen use in one time period being predictive increase in depression in the following time period for year 7 males and females. So again, year 7 is a crucial age. It seems to be that sort of 12, 13 year for males and females is the important time where you get some kind of predicted increase in depression. But there was only one cross-leg sort of effect found, and that was that depression is a predictor of social media use for grade 9 males. So there's no real sort of predictive effect except for social media, and it's the depression that predicts the social media, not the other way around. Now, maybe kids who are depressed take to social media. Who knows? And so these findings are all consistent with the findings about the changes in screen use over time for the trajectory groups, and it suggests that children whose level of depression increases over time, screen use increases commensurately at the same time. So one doesn't predict the other. they actually occur together. So, again, I think the questions now really is how much time? Well, 2 hours is certainly not feasible. The American Academy of Pediatrics' new recommendations, don't think go far enough, because they're saying that, limit to 1 hour or less a day. Well, schools are using them for 6 hours a day, so straight away that's out. And they talk about high quality programming. Now, how do you decide what's high quality programming? That's another thing I think that we need to be giving good advice on. We know that any intervention and prevention efforts need to be tailored to whether it's male or female, and also the developmental stage that the person's at. And we know that adolescents who are depressed at the outset have higher screen use. And again, it may be that that they develop depression more because they turn to screens, they become more isolated. It may be the other way around. Okay, but the big thing is that this cross-panel design we've had shows that one doesn't predict the other. They occur sort of commensurately. I just have one question left, and I think, we talk about the effect that screens have on us. And I just wonder, how different is it to that? Where people were wrapped up in newspapers and now we're wrapped up in screens. So I think the jury's still out on the effects of screen use on mental health. At the moment, from our design, we're saying that neither causes one or the other, but there are definitely associations, particularly at that sort of 13 to 14 years where depression is developing. And I think it'd be great if we could say, if you have a daughter who has developing depression, you keep her off screens, particularly social networking. And that's probably a nice bit of advice. So I'm open to any questions. We're doing 3 presentations, so we're trying to sort of get them, So I'm happy for any questions. Yeah.
Have you thought about the link in between, like through sleep? The third link might be screens preventing sleep and then sleep causing depression.
Yeah, we've seen quite a bit of work on that. We didn't collect any information on sleep, but we do know that when some of the kids that were actually completing our electronic survey, quite a few of them actually commented that, we put a slide bar that went up to a maximum of sort of 14 hours a day for screen use. And some were saying, I do more than 14 hours, which is a bit of a worry, But this is the only study that's done it from the time to wake till the time you go to sleep. But even then, 14 hours wasn't enough for some kids. But we haven't collected it, but there's certainly evidence showing that there's disruptive sleep patterns associated with screen use. Yeah.
Thank you. Was there any differentiation between what type of screen use? I mean, you mentioned how the screen use could be quite a protective thing as well.
Yeah. Oh, look, we just finished this now, and we've got information on the different kinds of screens, the different kinds of activities, up to 20 different types of gaming. So these are the things that we're doing now. I mean, we haven't actually the stuff on the depression we've just written, and we haven't even submitted it yet. So we've got loads of stuff on the different screens, but we haven't looked at that yet.
I was just wondering if you could make a comment on, I guess, as you mentioned before, there's multiple different types of screen use, and kids use those different screen use for different reasons, for school, for gaming, for social media. And I think the social media aspect is quite interesting because I guess it's the new schoolyard. It's the kind of the spot where there's lots of social validation and acceptance comes through. I mean, did that come through in any of the work that you've done, or?
Look, I mean. The thing that started this study off was actually, I was going through Hong Kong airport and I just saw all these kids walking through, not looking where they're going. And then I started looking at the kids going to school in Perth, and it just seemed to be a centrepiece of their lives. Then at the schools, looking in the break time, and some are on screens, with the mobile phones. It's got to the stage now where schools in Perth, in Western Australia, are actually banning the use of mobile phones. Throughout the whole day. But certainly, there are protective factors, with screens. Parents that we've spoken to say they like their kids to have phones so they can reach them whenever they want to. unfortunately, you know, a lot of teachers have told us that that when students are using theirs, they're actually communicating with the mates instead of doing the work they're supposed to. But the one thing about schools now is, because Ken, my colleague, and I go in schools a lot, you know, is that screens are now much part of the curriculum. You know, and you're looking at, they use them at school, then they go home, and they're using them at home for the homework aspects as well. So, if you think about yourselves, how much time you spend on screens in a day, you know, I would be in excess of 14 or 15 hours, I'm sure, you know. So, it's something that they keep saying is that parents are continually asking schools, you know, is this continual screen use, you know, causing any sort of mental health problems to my son or daughter? You know, and that's what we try to do, is to try to answer them. You know, so. Yeah.
Have you studied any ways to counteract this addiction?
Well, I think the first thing is, if you say to adolescents, don't do it, they'll do it all the more. You know, and so I think that really education is really important, particularly through schools. Schools are the ones that are struggling at the moment. Parents seem to be a bit ambivalent about it. You know, they even allow themselves to be using it in front of the kids, and if they go out for fast food, a lot of them are using it in these restaurants.
Okay.
You know, young kids sitting in four-wheel drive, you know, cars, screens on. Or when we came over on the plane, you know, there was a couple of kids by us who had their iPads on for about sort of 11 hours. So yeah, I think it's education.
Have you checked the background of these kids, the addicted kids?
No, this has just been the first one we've done, which has been
Okay.
this longitudinal study. So, but you know, we've just got so much data here. You can imagine how much we've got.
Yeah, yeah. Any questions? Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ken, do you want to?